It was the last day of school. I was in the 4th grade. 4th grade was the last year in our elementary school where kids had to be picked up by their parents. 5th graders were allowed to walk home on their own. My mom would always be the one to pick me up on the last day of school. My friend Dennis and I had a play date planned to celebrate the last day. Dennis wasn't in my class this year, but we had been friends since kindergarten. He was in a different dismissal hallway from me. After school was over, we lined up single file and walked to the exit door at the end of the hall, where we waited outside by our teacher, Miss Blue. I waited for Dennis's dad to appear from the crowd of parents shuffling in and out of the parking lot next to the doors. Then I heard my name. "Tommy! Tommy!" I looked over and saw a man waving at me as he approached. He introduced himself as Dennis's uncle and said he was picking me up. I went over to Miss Blue and said, "I'm being picked up." She asked, "Where is he, sweetie?" And I pointed to Dennis's uncle, who waved at her. Miss Blue dismissed me, and I went with the man. He led us through the crowd and was a very quick and jittery talker. He spoke fast and had a bit of a stutter. He was walking incredibly fast. It was almost hard to keep up with him with my backpack on. He explained to me that his brother, Dennis's dad, was working later than expected, so he was driving me back instead. We got to his car, a dark red hatchback from what I remember, and it took me this long to acknowledge the giant elephant in the room. Where was Dennis? Why weren't we picking him up too? The man turned to look at me in the back seat and said that Dennis was already at his house. I was shy around people I didn't know, especially adults, and I wasn't one to openly speak my mind if I was confused. But I was very confused. This was making less and less sense. The whole drive, the man kept yapping, telling stories of his days in elementary school, asking me questions like what sports I played, what we were learning in class. If I had to guess, we were in the car for like 10 minutes, which honestly for our town was a while. My house was only a 5-minute walk away from the school. We were definitely in an area I wasn't familiar with. When he parked the car in front of his house, it looked pretty normal to me from what I remember. He led us inside and shut the door, then locked it behind us. It was really, really dark inside. I realized why. All the curtains were shut. It almost felt like nighttime in there, especially because the only source of light was a dim lamp in the corner of the room. He then looked at me and smiled. I asked, "Where's Dennis?" He started acting really jittery and nervous. He said something like, "Oh, I think he's downstairs playing video games. Give me a second, wait here." He then disappeared into a nearby room. I heard a door open and then footsteps descending into a basement. I knew my heart was already racing. I knew I was in danger. I went to the door and quietly tried to open it, but I couldn't. It had some kind of lock that needed a key. I really started to panic now. Yet, I still probably held out a little bit of hope that Dennis would be coming up those stairs. But I knew the chances of that were slim. I regretted entering that house. I did the only thing I could think to do. I went to the kitchen and found a phone hung on the wall. I picked up the receiver and dialed 911. The first thing I said when they answered was, in a whisper, "Please come to this house. I've been kidnapped." They heard me. They acknowledged me, but I didn't say another word. I hid the phone under a towel in the corner of the room, with 911 still on the line. I hurried back to where the man left me, as I already heard his footsteps coming back upstairs. Then he called my name. "Come down, Dennis is down here." Then there was a pause. He repeated my name, and when I didn't answer, he came up the stairs fully to look at me. He asked if I was okay. I felt so sick and scared. I hated myself for walking into this situation and not being wiser. I asked in a very scared voice if I could leave. I remember the change in his face. His fake, friendly smile disappeared as he realized that I was no longer falling for this. He walked closer to me in a gentle manner until he was close enough to grab my wrist aggressively. He started pulling me toward the basement. I screamed and cried, and he screamed at me, "I'll let you go if you stop and behave." So I listened. I went down the stairs. Halfway down, the door slammed shut behind me, and I heard it lock. I walked fully down the stairs to this empty, unfinished basement with a concrete floor and one singular support beam in the middle of the room. There was a depressing yellow glow from one exposed light bulb hanging from the ceiling. If there was a place you'd imagine kidnapped children to go, this would be it. I heard his heavy footsteps upstairs. You could hear everything in this house. I don't know what he was doing, but I heard him walking around for a while. Then he came to the basement door, opened it, and called down, asking if I was hungry. I replied no. I didn't want him going into the kitchen and seeing the missing phone. He shut the door and locked it again. I sat down there waiting, my heart in my throat. And then I heard it. The doorbell ringing 3 times from upstairs, followed by banging sounds. Definitely the sounds of police pounding on the door. I refrained from screaming until I heard the front door open. But I never heard the man's footsteps approach the door. The doorbell kept ringing, and the banging continued. This went on for some time until I heard a really loud bang, and then multiple heavy footsteps, followed by multiple screaming voices. I started screaming for help, as loud as I could at the top of the stairs, banging on the door. The door was unlocked, and a police officer on the other side grabbed hold of me and hurried me outside. There were at least 3 cop cars out front. I had to tell everything to 2 of the cops as we waited for my parents to show up. The man was brought outside in handcuffs and put into a cop car. That was the last time I ever saw him. When my parents arrived on the scene, my mom was bawling her eyes out. There had already been a whole scene at the school, as cops were called, and Dennis's dad realized what had happened. This man was a work associate of Dennis's father. When he somehow learned that Dennis's dad would be picking up Dennis and me from school on the last day, he seized the opportunity to do what he did. A complete sick expletive. I don't know how he found out what I looked like. As I got older, I never really asked for more details because I try not to think about it. My mom went to counseling with me for months after this incident. Let's just say my parents didn't have kind words for Miss Blue, not verifying if I actually knew the person picking me up. If I hadn't thought to call the police before he basically threw me in that basement, I know for a fact I'd be dead right now. This was like 17 years ago. That man might be out of prison for all I know. It was junior year of high school and the last day of school. A lot of people either skipped entirely or left early after lunch. My friends and I were some of the latter. It was a stormy, dark day. Originally, a bunch of people from our grade had planned to hit the beach, but that obviously got canceled. So my smaller core group of friends decided to do something else. There used to be an abandoned elementary school in town that hadn't been used in about 10 years. It was set to be torn down by the end of the year. Still wanting to do something fun on the last day of school, we all agreed to break in and explore. There were no cameras on the building, and on a stormy day, no one would be outside watching the place. After lunch period, we left. Our friend Eddie had a car and a license, so he drove us there. The school was in the middle of a neighborhood, not on any main roads. There was a back parking lot covered by overgrown bushes and trees on one side, with the school walls on 2 others. It was the perfect place to park unnoticed. The building wasn't boarded up or anything, just locked. Eddie had a baseball bat in his trunk, which he pulled out to smash one of the windows. Even with the pouring rain, I was nervous that someone in the houses over the fence would hear the sound. We all laughed nervously as Eddie swung at the glass. After a few good hits, he knocked the window out and cleared the remaining shards with the bat before waving us over. One by one, we climbed inside. The window led into a classroom. A lot of stuff was still left in the room. Desks, chairs, even decorations on the walls. Based on what was left behind, it looked like we were in a 4th or 5th grade classroom. It was surreal. This was once a space where kids came to learn, but now it was just a cold, dark, abandoned room, collecting dust, waiting to be demolished. The sounds of thunder and lightning outside only added to the eerie atmosphere. The power had been shut off, so there were no lights. We expected this, though. Our phone flashlights were enough to see. Even without them, it wasn't pitch black since some light crept in through the windows and doors. We started exploring, moving through the hallways and into different classrooms. Every room was still filled with desks and chairs that hadn't been used in years. Our wet shoes squeaked on the floor as we walked. Sneaking around wasn't an option. The building showed clear signs of decay. It was obvious no one had been inside for a long time. As we neared the corner of the hallway, I instinctively turned around to glance back. That's when I noticed something sticking out from the doorway of one of the classrooms. I told my friends to look, and when we all aimed our phone lights toward the door, whatever it was quickly retracted into the classroom. All 4 of us muttered, "Oh," under our breath. Then we ran. We sprinted down the intersecting hallway and didn't stop until we were far enough away. It seemed like we had ended up in the kindergarten wing. That's when another sound echoed from down the hall. We weren't alone, but who else could be in here? The place was locked up. Every light was off. Fear took over, and we rushed into the first classroom we could find, shutting the door behind us. It was definitely a kindergarten classroom. At this point, we were less concerned about the creepiness and more about getting caught. We waited in silence, flashlights off. The rain outside was still coming down hard, and thunder and lightning crashed every few seconds. Then, the classroom door clicked. Someone was pushing it open. It creaked slowly, inching toward us until it was fully ajar. But there was no one in the doorway. The hallway beyond was nearly pitch black. We held our breath. Then, something appeared through the open door, a head, just barely peeking around the doorway, staring directly at us. When another flash of lightning lit up the room, we got a better look. It was a person. They weren't moving, just standing there, motionless, peering into the room. I started apologizing, saying we were leaving. No response. Eddie tried to take control of the situation. "Do you work here?" he asked. Still nothing. At this point, Eddie must have realized this wasn't normal. He handed me the bat while he struggled to unlock one of the classroom windows. Once he managed to get it open, he climbed through first. Then my other two friends followed. I was last. Before climbing out, I made the mistake of looking back one last time. The head was still there. Watching. That was all I needed. I scrambled through the window as fast as I could, half expecting to feel hands grabbing at my legs. As soon as I hit the ground outside, I ran. My friends were already sprinting toward Eddie's car, and I caught up as fast as I could. We jumped in, slammed the doors, and sped off. We never looked back. Later that year, the building was torn down and turned into a park. We never got in trouble for breaking in. To this day, we have no idea who that person was. A worker, a squatter, something else. Whoever they were, their behavior was beyond disturbing. When I was a freshman in college, I took a chemistry class that was really difficult for me. The tables were arranged in groups of 4, and I sat at a middle table on the left side, all the way to the end. Next to me was a guy named Zach. He was very awkward and gave off Reddit moderator vibes. To describe his appearance, he was about 5 feet 8 inches, a little overweight, and had a really ugly, patchy beard. But he knew his stuff in chemistry, and I think he was just good in school overall. We started talking in a pretty cordial way when he noticed I sucked in class and needed help. I would ask him for assistance, and he eventually started offering to do my homework for me. He even let me cheat off him on tests. I never got any flirtatious vibes from Zach, but that might have been because he was just too awkward to flirt in person. Eventually, he asked for my number so he could send me homework-related stuff. Obviously, I gave it to him. He was helping me out a ton and didn't give off any threatening vibes. He just seemed a little reclusive. Fast forward to the last day of class, and Zach did something completely unexpected. He asked me if I wanted to go on a date with him after class. I had no physical attraction to Zach in the slightest, and our personalities were complete opposites. But he did help me maintain an A throughout the semester. So I had to let him down super politely. I lied and told him I was going away to Miami for the next couple of weeks and wouldn't be around. Right away, he responded, "What about when you get back?" I felt like 2 weeks was long enough of a gap for him to lose interest. So I said something vague like, "Yeah, I could be around." He responded with a really cringy cool and nodded his head. From then until the end of class that day, it was super awkward for me. After class, I left straight for my car and drove home. I was a commuter, not a dormer, so after the last day of class, that was it. It was Thursday, and that night, my friends who went to the same school wanted to go out. While we were out, I got a text from Zach. He asked, "When are you going to Miami?" I told my friends about Zach while we were drinking, how he got me an A but now wanted a date. My friends joked that I should just go on the date to be nice. I joked back sarcastically, "Yeah, for sure." I told myself I'd respond later, but I was drunk and completely forgot. The next day I woke up to 2 follow-up texts, one with question marks and the next one saying, "You're going to ignore me now that you don't need me anymore, right?" So I replied, "Hey, I'm sorry, I was packing. I'm going to Miami today." He replied almost instantly, "Okay." Obviously there was no Miami trip, but he should have never found that out. Later that night, my girls and I went out again. While we were out, I got a scary text from Zach saying, "I thought you said you were going to Miami tonight." I almost dropped my drink when I saw it. I showed my friends and they were just as freaked out as I was. I replied, "What do you mean?" He responded, "Nothing, forget it. I just don't like liars." I genuinely felt like I was being stalked. I looked around the whole bar, but he wasn't there, at least as far as I knew. I didn't answer after that. I had no plans of ever answering him again. Then, later that night, just as I got home and was taking my shoes off, I heard knocks at my door. It was around 1 a.m. I froze. I called out, "Who is it?" and heard Zach's voice on the other side. "It's me!" I wanted to scream. I was home alone. I yelled through the door, "Leave, or my dad will come out and kick your ass." That seemed to work because he didn't knock again. I texted everyone I knew about what happened, my family, all my friends. I was horrified. Some suggested calling the police, and I said I would go to the nearest station in the morning. But morning hadn't even arrived yet when I received a long, disgustingly weird and creepy text from Zach. This is what it said. "I'm feeling a lot of emotions right now, after being used by someone for months and then lied to, and hurt and anger are two of them. I thought from the start of the semester in chemistry class that our chemistry was through the roof, no pun intended. I must say I am hurt that you would make up something as elaborate as a 2-week-long Miami trip just to avoid going out with me, even after I stuck my neck out for you all semester and risked my own academic standing. I definitely have noticed the way you looked at me sometimes in class, and I can't pretend there wasn't a hint of interest there. All I'm asking for at this point is for one date. That's it. I'm not asking for your hand in marriage, though I surely would be quite an ideal husband to have if I do say so myself. I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt that you needed more time to think over the prospect of going on a date with me. I know how much I have to offer, much more than these losers all over campus. If you want, I can come back to your house and we can talk about it in person. I am only making this offer once. I'm just very crushed to feel like I wasted so much this semester for nothing in return. Yours, truly, Zach." I sent this to everyone. I didn't care that it was 3 a.m. I called my dad until he picked up and told him how scared I was. After he read the text, he took it upon himself to send Zach a lengthy text of his own. He also attempted to call him like 10 times, but Zach was clearly too much of a coward to pick up. The next day I went to the police station with the text saying I wanted to press charges. One of the officers said Zach would be contacted. Zach never picked up any calls from the police, who were trying to get him to come in for questioning, nor did he answer any of their text messages. Zach completely disappeared. I never heard from him again. Between the police contacting him and my dad's pretty scary texts and voicemails, that basement-dwelling creep was probably himself. Luckily, I never saw him on campus again or anywhere else. But I can say, I now know what it's like to deal with an actual stalker.